So John, keep safe. Call in anytime. You know the hours. You know when we're here, and I'd love to hear your opinions. You have a great mind, and certainly we should discuss things at future in great lengths.
Great. You have a good one. God bless.
You too. God bless you. All right, thanks, John. That was John calling from North Carolina, giving the perspective. He's going to be coming down to the when they have the Democratic National Convention, which should be interesting. We covered a few things there that was sort of on track. Everything, as I always say in all these shows, it's meets in the middle. Everything sort of has a point where the conversation leads to the same common denominator, this same spot, like that endless, bottomless pit of evil with the endless connections of spider webs that lead to the same place. So what else is this criminal government trying to do to us? Well, they're testing their systems to make sure they can take over the airwaves and give us their propaganda. They are testing the cell phones next, and internet will be coming next. There's also a federal crackdown assured as the systems keep moving into place. You already have these TSA is now in moving into more states. More states are going to opt into, like Tennessee, which is allowing them to actually, I can't even believe it, just stop motorists and do Homeland Security checks. Give me your papers. Let me have your papers. I must see your papers. Because we're turning into a Nazi, Gestapo-run, country. It just makes me sick. With that in mind, Paul Joseph Watson had written a great article here. Americans are now living in a society that rivals Orwell's 1984. And it is pretty true, because even things that Orwell had perceived, some of the things go far beyond that. It's more advanced. You don't have to rely on helicopters to spy on citizens. They can use these little unmanned drones that can fly around. It's just unbelievable. We are getting into that state. Telescreens everywhere, messages going through your personal messages, having the ability to take your cell phone on a traffic stop and download all the information from it. Why is all this here? To catch the bad guys, right? Yeah. To keep us safe. We're going to pull you over. We're going to make sure that you have an RFID with a GPS chip for the real ID and for your citizenship status. Meanwhile, all the illegal aliens are coming all over the place, not getting licenses, doing whatever they want. But yes, you will have to have this to protect and help immigration. It is Orwellian, because it's doublespeak. It says, we're going to protect the borders, but we're going to let everybody come through, and all the Americans are going to have ID cards. That's it. Okay. We are going to protect the borders, let all the illegal aliens come through, and all the Americans are going to have real ID cards to protect their identities. That's what they're basically saying. TSA is now hassling drivers in other places. The Viper Visible Intermodal Prevention and Response Teams in Tennessee proudly announced that it partnered with the TSA to be the first state to do this, as I mentioned. Department of Homeland Security is also developing a network of quote-unquote snitches to say something if you see something that looks suspicious. So we all have to be on this alert and be paranoid. If you see, and you hear these commercials on the radio and on television, officer, I see a box and it looks like there are wires coming out of it. Wires? It's just this dramatic nonsense, It's like, oh my God, come on, people. Come on. Do you really, they really do know that you are this dumb to be frightened by that, while you're watching, stuffing your mouth with popcorn and swilling beer, during the football game. I need somebody to tell me if I see something that looks dangerous. Hey, I see some guy with 4 gallons of gasoline coming out of the putting it into his truck. What am I supposed to do? assume that he's going to blow something up, or maybe he has to fill a generator because there's no power on his block like it was here. I mean, this is going to turn us into like a paranoid nation, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, this is just nuts. And they're doing this all, it's all social control, it's all psychological warfare, it's all part of the mind control to get you to submit to what they tell you to do. It's textbook. I mean, Hitler, they're doing Hitlerian operandi created something, I created a word there, I don't know. But it's not good. A little more news, and then I'm going to play this interesting piece here, news piece, where we actually, for the rare times on mainstream news, actually hear the word New World Order and calling these people out, like I do every show here. An English gentleman, and I was just amazed. I just ran through it once, and I saw it. I said, I've got to play this, and it really does break down what's gone on, what's happening, and from another viewpoint. However, I mean, the gentleman is clearly well scholared and versed in what's actually going on here, and how this designed implosion has occurred. I was trying to explain that to John, that all of these things that have happened have been set up to happen, and these presidents are, you know, they go along with the agenda. That's why they're selected, as he used FDR as a model, or as an example. FDR is on record of saying exactly that. Presidents are selected, not elected. They're selected because they're going to go along with the agenda. And then when you don't go along with the agenda, or you find fault with the agenda, they get rid of you. Now, it's not as if it's out in the open, although now presidents are aware of it. I mean, it took a couple of presidents getting knocked off for this to happen. Remember, he was also mentioning, John was talking about the turn of the century with history in the late 1800s, 1898. Well, in 1888, when John Garfield was murdered, he had went on record recently prior to that, speaking of the bankers, it was saying that, you know, when you look at who's with all the influence of these mega banks, basically, and their power and influence, that it doesn't surprise you how when a few men, several men, control all of this wealth, how periods of inflation and depression originate. Again, that's on record. John Garfield, who was murdered very shortly after speaking that. In fact, he didn't even make it past the year 1888. He was killed on July 4th, or was it July 6th? He was shot on July 4th, and I think died on July 6th, 1888. Shot by a Charles Guiteau, who was sort of like a really raving type of typical nutcase that they find, you know, like, that they blame on these, that they get to do evil things and murder them. He was looking for a job, and Guiteau was refused a position because he wrote some letter or something he read, and people thought that it would be, he should have been made an ambassador, and they thought he was nuts. I guess he was nuts. But Garfield was definitely taken out. They you know, put a lot of spin on that whole story of history too, how he only had a few dollars and couldn't afford the grip that had he wanted it to have a pearl grip, but he couldn't afford the extra dollar. I mean, it's all this stuff is in history books and in the news. And then McKinley also was going against some of the policies. And then, of course, you know what happened with JFK. Yeah, it's interesting when you look at the way that these things happen, and the history of the banking aspect of it. Look at what the banking and the future that goes right after what occurs. It always brings us to war or future military-industrial complex growth, and again, the bankers financing both sides of the wars, of like every war for the last 200 years practically. It's a very deceptive means that they get their power grid in place, and then they war against their opposition to get more power, to consolidate more power. It's not this country against that country. It's consolidating the powers of those countries in their hands. That is their goal. That is what collectivism is. And it's done stealthily. it's done blaming two countries against fighting against each other, and the globalists could care less who wins, because they're going to get control over the winners and the losers. It's terrible, but it's true, and this piece that I'm going to play really amplifies that in a big way. But first, I'd like to talk a little bit more about what we were talking about here. With the FBI is now collecting biometric information from massive interagency database. This is from Madison Rupert, and Big Brother's on the march. And again, Homeland Security is just going wild. Their programs are criminalizing Americans who've done absolutely nothing wrong. And thanks to a Freedom of Information Act lawsuit filed by the Center for Constitutional Rights, along with the National Day Labor Organization Network and the Benjamin Cardozo Immigrant Justice Clinic, it has now emerged that the FBI is an equally large player in high-tech police state that we find ourselves in. In an article by Sunita Patel and Scott Paltrowitz on Common Dreams, Big Brother is already upon us. This is a point that I attempt to make every possible juncture. It is crucial for Americans to realize that an Orwellian high-tech police state is not something on the distant horizon, but something which we already live in. Yes, I know that, Madison. Unfortunately, very true. Anyway, the document contained revealed that the FBI views massive biometric information collection as a goal in itself, as part of the Next Generation Identification System, NGI system. This is where they're going. More Orwellian crap. NGI system aims to collect fingerprints, palm prints, iris scans, identifying marks, scars, tattoos, facial characteristics, and voice recognition. These are not necessarily collected from arrested suspects, but also from mobile biometric scanning devices and fingerprints left anywhere and everywhere. This biometric information can be then used in conjunction with facial recognition technology and threat assessment algorithms that can be deployed at an airport or even in an unmanned aerial vehicle, better known as a drone. Oh my God, I can't even read this stuff anymore. It's just scaring me. There are links to the Department of Homeland Security and Immigrations and Customs Enforcement's database with the FBI's criminal database. It is all tied together, and including ICE also. It's just unbelievable. So they're already carrying out latent fingerprint and palm prints when they're collected more than 1 million palm prints from crime scenes, and they just keep putting this into this database that they're collecting and analyzing. Thankfully, the American Civil Liberties Union took up the case and has filed lawsuits in Georgia and North Carolina on behalf of these people that have done this stuff. An example is an American citizen, Mark Lytle, who was deported and transferred to 5 different countries in 4 months because somebody incorrectly typed Mexico as his place of birth. Can you believe this? This is how they waste all our money. And everyone's running wild in the country, you know, and they're giving them guns to the drug cartels. And they're arresting an American citizen where somebody, an administrator, accidentally typed Mexico as his place of birth. Now, the poor guy has mental disabilities, so he was not really understanding what was going on, but look at how they jumped him through this whole system. It's just awful. Then there's a case of a Massachusetts man, John Gass, who had his driver's license revoked because a facial recognition system found that his authentic license was fraudulent. Of course it wasn't. These types of egregious and hardly negligible mistakes are only going to become more prevalent as the FBI employs this new facial recognition and biometric technology. There's many cases of this. George Orwell couldn't have possibly imagined the scope and pervasiveness. Yeah, I said that before. So to read more about NGI and SCOM programs, see the additional Freedom of Information documents. You can go to that link on Freedom of Information / biometric, FBI collecting biometric information. Incredible. Also going down that road where, you know, something that is good also has a more sinister undertone. So what else is this criminal government trying to do to us? Well, they're testing their systems to make sure they can take over the airwaves and give us their propaganda. They are testing the cell phones next, and internet will be coming next. There's also a federal crack, a point where the conversation leads to the same common denominator, this same spot, like that endless, bottomless pit of evil with the endless connections of spider webs that lead to the same place. Thanks, John. That was John calling from North Carolina, giving the perspective. He's going to be coming down to the when they have the Democratic National Convention, which should be interesting. We covered a few things there that was sort of on track. Everything, as I always say in all these shows, it's meets in the middle. Everything sort of has a... So John, keep safe. Call in anytime. You know the hours. You know when we're here. And I'd love to hear your opinions. You have a great mind, and certainly we should discuss things at future in great lengths.
Great. You have a good one. God bless.
You too. God bless you. All right, thanks. Down, assured as the systems keep moving into place. You already have these TSAs now in moving into more states. More states are going to opt into, like Tennessee, which is allowing them to